Okay, thanks for coming to this amazing session on web exploitation. My name is Martin Johns. I'm from TU Braunschweig, and I would like to invite our first speaker. So, you really have to say, I'm very sorry, I don't want to butcher your name, okay. Especially now that I learned that you speak my language, but I don't yours.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
So it's Xuanzi?
Yeah, Xuanzi.
Yeah,
Dankeschön.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's not one of the authors of the paper, so he's just
not this one. Sorry, not this one.
It's not the one?
No, it's not right. It's the cross.
We need the one with Chen, the Chen paper.
That's the one we have as a video, so we would just need that presentation.
But we have the speaker here, right? So we need the slides.
Excellent. So if you have the presentation, we can put it up for you. All I have is a video.
Oh, really?
So let's figure this out.
Okay.
Let's invite the next speaker first. So
okay.
It's you.
Yeah, me? Okay.
So we have Giancarlo. He's an assistant professor from Fudan University, and he will tell us all about the misdirection of trust, the demystification of the abuse of dedicated URL shortening services.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
So wait for the slides.
Oh. It's a great honor to present here. I'm sorry for, I think I'm the second player, but now I'm come to the first. So, I'm Geng Hong from Fudan University. I'm the the fourth author of this paper. And our first author cannot come to the US because his visa issue. So I will present this for him. So, what's URL shortening service? URL shortening service can simplify link sharing and enabling user checking. The Bitly is the most popular or most famous URL shortening service, serves over 100 million user URLs. And Google File-based link also use the shortening service to power mobile apps. Let's have a look. The elive.fudan.edu.cn/public/cross/. Anyway, can be used the URL shortening service to transform it to the very short link. The short URL has benefit to fit the limited mobile screen display or memorable or recognizable. But how to make the shared URL service? There's one option like shared URL shortening service bitly.com. It has a low cost, but it no limit to a specific users. So there appears another types of URL shortening service. We name that dedicated URL shortening service, which has a which may have a high reputation. It uses a brand domain name such as Walmart, Amazon, Shell.com, etc. And it's designed to have a high security enforcement, which only serves the trusted URLs, such as Walmart only serve Walmart URL, Amazon only serve Amazon URL. But there is a critical question that where the dedicated URL shortening service implemented an adequate security measure to enforce its assumption. In this work, we find a misdirection attack to reveal nowadays many applications, many websites, it implemented dedicated URL shortening service with an insecure method. In our threat model, web attackers may compromise a vulnerable DUSS to serve malicious URLs, and victims may visit this link and find it be hacked. And this is not a very, very novel terms, since in 2012, the USA.gov has been hacked. The URL shortening service has been hacked, and within 6 days, more than 4,000 victims appears. So let's have a look at how attackers can find vulnerable URL shortening service. First, it probe the URL shortening service to get where there exists a DUSS, and then it constructs a dedicated URL. In this case, the DOSS service will check if the genuine or the benign URL in the host 1001.com. If yes, it will be transform it to a shortened service u.1001.cn. Then, if he send a evil URL to this service, and it will get a shortened URLs, and he can use this evil.com to act as a benign website, benign URLs to send it to anyone else to do phishing, to remote code injection, etc. So to face these questions, we first study the entire attack surface and find the detection method and to evaluate some security impact of this attack. So to study this question, the first question we met is how to find the DOSS data set. In the wild, there didn't exist some SOTA work, so we first collect the URLs from social media reports, and we found the URL length, and we get a lot of that URLs which may be a DOSS link. So after that, we to distill it from the URL length or response code, response header, and then we found some URLs which has the redirect capability, and to distill that the shared URL shortening service and the dedicated URL shortening service. So we found 88 unique DOSS. We find there exist two types of DOSS. First is self-developed, like many famous network corporation or technical corporations such as Reddit, YouTube. It has its own developed service, and some other companies may buy the third-party hosted commercial DOSS service, like Bitly. These two types exist. That the left side, it can host this service, and the third-party side only use the CNAME, DNS CNAME technique to point to the Bitly or TinyURL service. So, and we also find there exists some incorrect security implementation in this DOS service, such as domain check and path check. It may meet that it may, for the domain check as an example, when we add the @ in the HTTPS URL, it may bypass the check service. And the second issue is how to find a vulnerable DOS in the wild. Frankly speaking, this technical challenges is our met in this study, but we have tried several paths to solve this issue. And the final, we choose the following method to solve this question. First, we need to identify the DOSS API. Then it's hard to trigger them and find where there is a vulnerability. API inferencing, we have conducted many methods. We try to dynamic trigger any possible apps, but we found it consumes many human resources. So in the end, we use the static analysis technique to find the possible URL shortening service in the client-side code. And we think if you want to shortening a URL, you first update a longer URL, then receive a shortened URL. So it's the first indicator. And then we'll also find some third-party API calls may be integrated with a SDK calls. And then the second approach is that how to trigger this API. this step seems that has not very research technical, but in the real world, in our study we find it's not so easy to actually trigger this API calls. And since we all want to test whether this API is vulnerable, we also need to replace or instrument this API calls to insert some potential test case. So we also paid a lot of time to generate this step. And finally, to try to test the vulnerability detection as much as possible, cause a very limited security impact or conduct ethical scanning. We build the test suite with the least POC URLs which integrates most known URL check vulnerabilities to submit it to the remote APIs. And we found that analyzing around 300 APKs and find around 15 link shortening service and verified 22 vulnerability API after around 300 tests. And as the social impact, security impact, first of all, only social users prefer to trust to the real domain names. It's our well-known issue. And our test the URL's Tranco rank to the phishing tank is around 1 to 1 million, and the average number is around 50,000. But in our collected shortening service is around 10,000, which has a higher domain ranks, which means users may be deceived by this, may more easily be deceived. And as for the domain-based checker, we find that since I remember that in the first several pages that the NDSS is have a security consensus that which only redirect the trusted URLs. So if we can bypass these security checks, that many security checks can be failed. So we find that around 11 apps and webs are vulnerable to the misdirection attacks, and many are famous apps in the world. So as a conclusion, we have conducted the first systematic study and uncovering DOSS and proposed some detection method to detect the misdirection attack in the wild and find some widely ranging security implications such as phishing and bypassing domain checkers. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this talk. So do we have any questions from the audience? So what I would like, so you found 22 vulnerable services, right?
Yeah.
Can you give us an intuition, what were their mistakes? So why were they vulnerable?
Okay. For example, as the one of these 4 apps, they think you submit a link to the DOSS service. By design, it should only transfer its own link. But when we submit malicious URL and bypass its checks, you as a user, you think you click an official link, but instead you click our phishing link. So you may be scammed.
Okay. So how could they avoid this problem?
Okay. We also list some mitigation in our paper, but I think one of the most important is that even though your security assumption is that you only transfer the trusted link, so you should make the correct, complete security check before a client side send you a request. Yeah.
Okay. Then thanks again for the presentation.
Thank you.
So you probably noticed we're switching around the order of the talks a bit because to be first presentation of this session will be video, and we will play this last because the speaker couldn't be here. So I'm happy to now welcome our friends from Saarland, from CISPA, here on stage. But so what's your name?
Gianluca.
Gianluca. Gianluca is not an author of the paper, so he's voluntarily stepped in to present the work of Soheil, Kai, and Giancarlo. But for the Q&A, we will have one of the authors sitting here. So get your questions ready. But Gianluca, tell us all about open redirects.
Thank you. Well, welcome to the presentation of the paper "Do Not Follow the White Rabbit, Challenging the Myths of Harmless Open Redirections" by Soheil, Khodayari et al. As previously announced, I'm not one of the authors, but let's dive in. HTTP redirections redirect users from one resource to another, and they are typically handled server-side. Sometimes it is, however, still possible to dynamically define the destination of a redirection through URL parameters. But this can be dangerous if URL parameters are not properly validated, as an attacker may exploit an OpenRedirect vulnerability to redirect users to malicious websites, hosting, for example, phishing pages, malwares, or other kinds of malicious contents. So far, the community has quite overlooked the threat posed by OpenRedirect vulnerabilities, as these do not directly harm the sites themselves, and they are also considered to be less impactful than other types of threats, such as cross-site scripting or client-side request forgeries. Indeed, most often, vulnerability disclosure programs from industry do not consider open redirects as issues eligible for a reward. And furthermore, open redirects only sum up to around 1% of all issues reported on the CVE database, compared to the 37% of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. But is this the entire picture, or is there more? Well, of course there is more. The recent shift towards client-side task offloading has introduced JavaScript-based redirections. These pose additional risks, as now open redirects have the potential to escalate to full-fledged cross-site scripting, client-side request forgery, or information leakage vulnerabilities. As an example, this slide shows a minimal cross-site scripting vulnerability triggerable through the redirect parameter, the JavaScript scheme, and some arbitrary JavaScript code. The objective of this paper has therefore been the reevaluation of long-standing security implications connected to open redirect vulnerabilities, with particular focus on how to detect such impactful threats stemming from open redirect problems. In the past, the community has focused on vulnerability indicators to detect candidate open redirect vulnerabilities to then validate using dynamic analysis. This approach is lightweight, as the presence of indicators is immediately noticeable from URLs alone. However, it suffers from the major drawback of having to rely on a handcrafted list of indicators, which is very challenging to produce in a comprehensive way. Another approach requires the use of static analysis to analyze the client-side JavaScript code of web pages to detect vulnerabilities. However, this is also impractical, as it's very, very costly, requiring the use of page sampling strategies to reduce the cost of the analysis. This paper proposes a novel cost reduction methodology to combining the best of the two approaches and enabling the study and mining of open redirect vulnerabilities at scale. In particular, the paper has three main research questions. The first one analyzes how to use static analysis to extract patterns indicative of open redirect vulnerabilities from real websites. The second one verifies how prevalent are open redirects in practice and if we can find and mine them efficiently at scale from the wild. Finally, the third research question analyzes if it's possible to escalate true open redirect vulnerabilities to more worrisome classes of vulnerabilities. To answer these research questions, the paper presents Stork, a framework enabling the study and mining of open redirect vulnerabilities at scale, providing a fast and cost-effective trade-off with static analysis. Stork gets as input a dataset of snapshots of web pages, and then uses static analysis together with runtime monitoring tests to identify true OpenRedirect vulnerabilities. From confirmed vulnerable URLs, Stork then extracts a catalog of vulnerability indicators that it then uses to mine additional vulnerabilities from left-out snapshots, Google search, or the Internet Archive. Finally, Stork verifies the possibility of escalating the identified OpenRedirect vulnerabilities to more worrisome classes of vulnerabilities, such as cross-site scripting, client-side request forgery, or information leaking vulnerabilities. In practice, Stork adopted a dataset of snapshots of web pages collected using Playwright and Foxhound in October 2022. This dataset comprises over 1 million pages across 10,000 different applications, websites, and it was divided into two main partitions. The first one was used for indicators extraction. The second one was left out for tests. To actually build the catalog of vulnerability indicators used in the paper, Stork analyzed the client-side JavaScript code of each web page using Joe and detected candidate OpenRedirect vulnerabilities that it then validated using runtime monitoring tests. Confirmed vulnerable URLs were then grouped together to distill common patterns to use as indicators. Finally, to include in this catalog also indicators relative to server-side OpenRedirects, the authors manually reviewed the relative entries from the CVE database. This approach was able to identify over 20,400 confirmed vulnerable URLs across 599 websites and yielded a catalog of 184 concrete vulnerability indicators organized into 9 different categories. If you are interested to see more results about these, please refer to the paper. The paper then evaluated the performance of this catalog of indicators against static analysis in finding OpenRedirect vulnerabilities. In particular, the evaluation dataset comprised 42,000 web pages across 50 different random applications from the test set. And from these static analysis was able to identify 46 true OpenRedirect vulnerabilities from 8 different applications with a false positive rate of 20%. Indicators, on the other hand, identified 16 true vulnerabilities across 6 applications with no false positives. There are several takeaways. The first one is that indicators can be used to identify vulnerabilities that static analysis might have missed, as 5 of the vulnerabilities identified by indicators had actually been overlooked by static analysis. Another finding is that indicators can help in casting a wider net and pinpoint applications in need of further testing, as half of the applications identified as vulnerable by static analysis had actually also been flagged as vulnerable by indicators. However, indicators suffer from a large share of false negatives due to the optional nature of the URL parameters they rely on. Where indicators really shine is in their efficiency, however, as they are over 100 times faster while requiring 590 times less storage than static analysis. They're the trade-off. Stork then used the catalog of 184 concrete vulnerability indicators to try to mine new OpenRedirect vulnerabilities. In particular, Stork collected candidate vulnerable URLs matching at least one of the indicators from left-out snapshots, Google search via dorking, or the Internet Archive. It then validated each URL using runtime monitoring tests and was able to identify 375 new OpenRedirect vulnerabilities across 326 websites. 202 of these were client-side vulnerabilities, while 171 of these were server-side vulnerabilities. Again, if you are interested about seeing more results, please refer to the paper. Finally, Stork verified the possibility of escalating all vulnerabilities identified in research questions 1 and 2 to more worrisome classes of vulnerabilities. In particular, all 21,000 detected OpenRedirects were tested using a dictionary of dynamic XSS payloads, and additionally, 2 vulnerabilities per site were randomly selected to be manually vetted against request forgery or information leaking vulnerabilities. This approach yielded 1,900 possible escalations across 332 websites. Additionally, it found that indicator-based findings have actually a higher escalation rate over static analysis-based findings, 22 against 8%. So at this point, we can therefore reevaluate the threat posed by OpenRedire vulnerabilities. OpenRedire vulnerabilities are widespread, affecting around 9% of all websites out there. Additionally, 10% of those can be escalated to excess vulnerabilities, with a further 3% being exploitable for request forgery and information leaking attacks. To conclude, this paper proposed a novel cost reduction methodology to study and mine OpenRedire vulnerabilities from the wild. It created a catalog of 194 vulnerability indicators and measured the prevalence and the severity connected to OpenRedire vulnerabilities. So thank you for your attention, and I leave now the floor to my supervisor for possible questions.
Yeah, thank you.